Good morning, Ocean Reef Chapel. Steve Carter here, and I wish I was with you live. Because for a few selfish reasons, there has to be only a few places, tops, that are as beautiful as Ocean Reef. And also, when I was there last year, the people of Ocean Reef Chapel, you guys were just so kind, so thoughtful. Some people spoke into my life, and I was really looking forward to being with you again. I'm grateful for Pastor Bob. I'm grateful for the board, even for the worship team that has just put together a really creative service. And again, even though we can't be live and we might be tuning in from our living rooms with our families or our kitchens or maybe even the golf carts, I believe that this word from John 15 can speak to you. It's a word that Jesus spoke into the hearts and the minds of his disciples before he was about to be arrested, before he was about to go to the cross, and before the power of the resurrection. And I think as many of us are living in times of uncertainty, financial uncertainty, kind of uncertainty with COVID-19, I think we need to be reminded of the words that Jesus spoke in John 15. And you're going to find that there is one word that he uses 10 times in 10 verses. And this one word, I think, is more essential today than ever before. I'm going to read from John 15. If you have a Bible, you can pull out your Bible, maybe kind of share it as you sit on the couch in the living room or around your table. But hear these words that Jesus spoke into his disciples. I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain, there's the word, remain in me. Well, quick time out. That word remain in some translations is the word abide. Abide comes from the word abode, which literally means to make your home. So this is what Jesus is simply saying. I want you to remain, abide, abode, make your home in me. As I also remain, abide, abode, and make my home in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain, abide, abode, make their home in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain, abide, abode in me. Verse 5, I'm the vine, you are the branches. If you remain, abide, abode in me, and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain, abide, abode in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain, abide, abode in me, and my words remain, abide, and abode in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples, my Talmudim, my apprentices, my students. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain, abide, abode in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will remain, abide, abode in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and remain, abide, abode in his love. Today, I want to take you to a vineyard. And I want to talk to you as one Talmudim, one disciple, one student to another. From what I learned from a vine dresser in a vineyard in South Africa. I've always loved John chapter 15. I've always felt like it was so beautiful because it finds itself between kind of John 13, where Jesus is like washing the disciples' feet, And John 14 talking about kind of the Holy Spirit. And then there's this conversation in John 15 at a vineyard. John 16, more conversations about the Holy Spirit. And John 17, a prayer for the disciples and for all the believers. And many scholars believe that these 5 chapters are essential to becoming and discovering what Jesus was going to do, who he was, and what he's inviting us as Talmudim and disciples to be and to do. So today, you heard that word, remain. Today, I want to teach you how to keep the remain thing, the main thing, and whatever circumstances you're facing, how to stay connected to the vine. And this is going to require 3 essentials. The first essential, and you heard Jesus say it right off the bat, I am the vine, and my Father is the gardener. Now, the vine, this was the nationalistic symbol of Israel. We see it in Isaiah 5. We see it in Ezekiel. We see it throughout the Old Testament. Even when the Hebrew people went out and those spies checked out the promised land, what did Moses ask them to bring back? Bring back a cluster of grapes. Let me see the fruit of the land. And whenever you found yourself looking up at the top of King Herod's temple, the temple during the days of Jesus, there were these 6-foot gold clusters of grapes. I mean, this whole idea of the vine and the grapes, it was symbolic of favor and blessing. And Jesus is speaking, I am the fulfillment of that. I am the true vine. And then so uniquely, he says, and my Father is the gardener. My Father's the gardener. My Father is like the one that's actually kind of helping this vine bear and produce the best kind of fruit. So at first glance, I've read this passage so many times. I've read it and kind of been like, oh yeah, I get it. It's about just staying connected to the vine. It's about understanding that Jesus is that true vine. But then I found myself in South Africa and we were doing some missionary work. But right next door to this orphanage was this amazing vineyard. And because there were so many kids that had come into this orphanage, they didn't have enough beds. And so one of the people who were heading the trip said, hey, here's a couple of options. You guys can stay in town at a local hotel, or you can stay next door at a vineyard. A couple of my friends were like, oh, I'm going to stay in the hotel. And I was like, I'm staying at the vineyard. I found myself every day reading John 15, getting up super early in the morning, and I would just follow the workers out there. And you got to know something about me. I get really, really curious. I love to learn, and especially about matters of wine. I love to learn because I felt like this week I was going to discover what John 15 was all about. What I learned from this vine dresser brought John 15 into new meaning, new sense of depth, new life, new importance to what it means to walk near and close and connected to the true vine. So today, we are going to talk through the 3 essentials of how to keep the main thing. And the first one is this: you must trust the pruning. Now, I know for many of us, we probably look at our lives and if we really believe that Jesus is the vine and we're just a branch and we want to bear fruit with our one and only lives, then we have to actually trust the shears to the one who has a better vision for our life. And so I walked up to this vine dresser in South Africa and I said, would it be okay if I just followed you around? Can I ask you some questions? And he said, sure. And as I followed him around, I said, hey, tell me about pruning. He said, well, there's 2 types of pruning. The first type of pruning is referred to as thinning. Now, what you're going to see here is not just a guy who's a preacher, not just a guy who, loves Jewish roots, but also someone who is a terrible artist. This is free. This is just for you. My wife is actually an artist, but I'm going to be trying my best to draw a vine because I want you to understand what this whole idea of thinning is all about. Now, let's just say you've got a vine right here, and we're just going to say this is your vine. I mean, just look at this. I mean, that's just, you just see this. This is like the base of a vine. Now, what's amazing is that when a vine begins to grow, the branches are just growing like crazy. And here's the thing, they will just grow and grow and grow and grow and grow. And all of a sudden, you have this branch that is just wild, this vine that is just out of control. I don't know about you, but have you ever looked at your schedule? Have you ever felt like your schedule is just a little too crazy? And what's amazing is there's so much that we can be doing with our lives. And sometimes there is all of these good things that just begin to get added to our schedule without us even being aware of it. We neglect to realize that we only have so much like units of energy. And so we begin to kind of take some of this units of energy and begin to like go to this initiative, go to this business, go to this relationship, go to this thing, this thing, this thing. And you know what? Little by little, we find ourselves not being able to give our best, but we just almost give like just leftovers. And our relationships, our businesses, our families, our lives, our souls really begin to struggle and suffer. And so a great vine dresser is going to look at a vine and he's going to begin to inspect each branch. And what he's looking for is he's trying to think which branch is strong enough for the elements, strong enough to kind of handle kind of the seasons, the potential loss of water, the potential freezing. And whatever branch is not strong enough, you know what he's going to do? He's going to thin it out. He's going to cut because he recognizes there's only so much units of energy. And he wants to ensure that the best branches, the strongest branches, the branches that are going to bear the most amount of fruit is going to get all the sustenance and units of energy that it deserves. Friends, can I just stop and say this? If you're going to keep the main thing, you're going to have to trust God. And you're going to have to hand over the shears. And you're going to have to literally invite him to look at your schedule and say, is there anything that needs to be thinned out? Is there anything in my life where maybe I'm too busy to pray? Too busy for deep relationships? Too busy for time with you? And I kid you not, one of the most sacred things that you can do is really organize your schedule. A lot of people will tell me, hey, this is what I believe, and my honest assessment and answer will be, show me your schedule. Because when someone shows me their schedule, then I see what is important to them, what they're willing to put into ink, what they're willing to say, this is the kind of life, not that I'm just speaking that I want, but the kind of life that I'm actually choosing to plan out and schedule. I don't know about you, but even during this COVID-19 days, a lot of our lives are getting thinned out. We can't leave our homes. A lot of things are just different in this season. But it also creates an opportunity for us to kind of solidify, man, where do we want the best energy, the best that we can bring to our families, best that we can to do for Christ, and thin out all the stuff that doesn't really matter. This is the moment for us. And if you're going to keep the main thing, You got to trust the pruning. What would it look like for you, even just this afternoon or this week? Just to say, you know what, God, here's my schedule. I don't know what the next season's going to hold. But number one, I want to put you. I want to put that time in ink, and I want to remain in you. And it might mean that I'm just going to drive around kind of the grounds, or it might mean I'm going to find my favorite chair and I'm just going to open up your word. But I am going to remain in you, but I'm going to actually submit my schedule to you, and I'm going to let you speak into what needs to be thinned out. And if you do this, the things that he does invite you into have the best chance to bear the best kind of fruit. The second way that we keep the main thing is we learn to trust the process. Number one, you trust the pruning. Number two, you trust the process. See, there is another way that the vine dresser taught me about how they would prune. And this was fascinating to me. The way that he told me was that they would come up and they would see this vine, and literally they would begin to see the branches that were way more healthy in the ways that they were growing. And these vines that were growing, he would see that they had kind of these little kind of bulbs about ready to produce some grapes. And what he really understood was that some branches weren't actually ready. They weren't actually ready to produce the best and strongest kind of grapes. So here's what they would do. They would literally walk up to these bulbs, and this is the second way they would prune. The vine dressers taught me, they called it pinching. And they'd walk up to it, and they would just turn it, almost to say, this branch isn't ready. It isn't ready to bloom. Now, if you trust the gardener and you trust the pruning, there's going to be times in your life where you are ready. You are ready. And God just says, not now. Not now. I heard one mentor tell me once, he said, there's 3 ways that God will often answer your prayers. He'll answer with a yes, he'll answer with a no, or he'll answer with a not now. I don't know if you ever received one of those. It's almost like you've been building this business, or you've been building this idea, or there's been something you've been dreaming about, kind of seeing take place in your family or your life, and then all of a sudden, the unexpected happens. Welcome COVID-19. And all of a sudden, it's almost as if it's not now. Not now. And there's ways in which we can fight that, or we can really begin to go, God, what are you doing? I think oftentimes when God tells us not now, what we often do is we find ourselves looking at somebody else's yard. And maybe they're in a season of profound favor and blessing. And then all of a sudden we're like, God, why are they getting blessed? Why are they seemingly being able to do what they want to do? Why am I being pinched? Why not now? And this is what John 15 really invites us into, is in those seasons of uncertainty, do we trust that the gardener has a better vision for our life than we do? I don't know about you, but sometimes I think, if I'm really, really honest, I view myself as the vine, the branch, and the gardener. And really, my job is to remain in the vine. And my job is to trust that the gardener knows what's best for me, knows what's best for my family. But for many of us, we struggle with that because we want to be in control. But John 15 invites us into a different way. It invites us into trusting the process. Now, I don't know if you're a big sports person. I love sports. I actually host a podcast with ESPN Sam Ponder and Tampa Bay Buccaneers Sam Acho. It's called the Home Team Podcast. And every week we talk about kind of the uniqueness of faith and sports and culture and family. And one of my favorite teams is the Chicago Cubs. In 2016, after 108 years, the Cubs finally won a World Series. And they hired, many years before that, a man by the name of Theo Epstein. And Theo was the general manager of the Boston Red Sox and helped them win a World Series when they had gone through a massive drought. And then he comes to Chicago and he begins to preach this message: trust the process. He kept saying it over and over and over again. It became the anthem of Chicago. And Chicago Sports Talk would say, "Are we done trusting the process?" And Theo said, if we can draft well, we can scout well, we can build up our farm system, we can buy great pitching and a few good players, but if we can trust the process, you watch in a few years, we will be World Series ready. And then 2016 came, and I still can't believe it. I was at Game 5 at Wrigley. It's just one of the most greatest experiences of my life. And then to see a couple games later, we win the whole thing. Trusting the process is so critical. Trusting that God actually, what he began in you, if we allow it, he is going to continue to do, not just for our benefit, but for the kingdom's benefit. What's really fascinating about this passage of scripture is I asked the vine dresser, I said, hey, how long from when you put the seeds in the ground to when a vine begins to grow and start to bear fruit? You know what he told me? 3 years. 3 years. So just stop for a second. How long has Jesus been with his disciples? 3 years. 3 years. And Jesus knows he's about ready to go to the cross. And these disciples are going to be the ones who carry his story all throughout the ancient Near East. And he's like, it's your time to bloom. You have been with me. You have been watching me. If you remain, abide, and abode in me, as I remained, abide, and abode in my Father, if you remain, abide, abode in the commandments and in love, I kid you not, you are going to bear such amazing fruit. And friends, the same is true for us. Sometimes I'll sit as a pastor and I'll listen to people, and really deep down what they're sharing just, it literally breaks my heart, because I see what they're wrestling with. I see what they're feeling. I see what they're struggling with. And sometimes my answer back to them kind of surprises them. I look at them and I just say, hey, you know what? What I believe is that God's not done with you, that good is still going to come, and that your life is going to actually be a great bottle of wine. And they look at me and they're like, wait, what do you mean? Because I don't know if you know this, but I started questioning the vine dresser, and I said, hey, from when the seeds go in the ground to when like the grapes begin to produce, to when you actually take the grapes and begin to kind of put that through the process of fermentation and bottle it and begin to put it on a shelf or in a wine cellar, how long does it take for a great bottle of wine to come to fruition? And this vine dresser said, a great bottle of wine, somewhere between 9 and 10 years. What that did for me was absolutely change my perspective, because we live in a culture where we want it right now. We wait 3 minutes at Starbucks for our drink. We get a little bit impatient. But here's the thing. You cannot microwave spiritual formation, because, friends, it's like a great bottle of wine. You have to trust the pruning. You have to trust the process. And when you trust the vine and you trust the gardener, he's going to bear not just great fruit, but he's going to turn your life into a special bottle of wine. The third essential to keeping the main thing, is number one, you got to trust the pruning. Number 2, you got to trust the process. And number 3, you have to trust his promise. You got to trust the promises. And here's the promise, is this: if you remain, abode in Christ, he will bear much fruit through you. But apart from him, you can do nothing. Literally, you can do nothing. Nothing that is sustainable. Nothing that will flourish past your life. And every one of us, we want to leave a legacy. We want to leave the kind of legacy that our kids and our grandkids look at, our community respects, our chapel that we're a part of and church that we're connected to, and our friends that say, man, I want to be more like that. And when you keep the main thing, you leave a legacy with your family. You leave a legacy with your friends. You leave a legacy in charity. You leave a legacy that blesses your community. You leave a legacy that points people to the greatness of the vine and the greatness of the gardener. Now, I know maybe for some of you, you're sitting here and you're like, Steve, you don't know my life. You really don't know my life. I mean, you don't know how I've just kind of train wrecked a lot of relationships. I hurt some people. And maybe that's good for you as a pastor, but not me. And sometimes I think the lies of the enemy can just get in our mind. And slowly but surely, we can kind of step away and make excuses for remaining in him and keeping the main thing. I was peppering this vine dresser and I said, hey, tell me about different grapes. How do they make like different kinds of grapes? And he used a word that I think many of us are understand. And he's told me this word, grafting. I said, well, explain it. Back to my drawing. And he literally begins to draw this out. And he said, you've got kind of this, kind of like the root, the kind of this, the kind of the base of this vine. He says what they do is they literally just cut the top of it off. No branches are there. And this is literally what he says. He says that the vine begins to weep and bleed. Like he literally is like, it begins to weep and bleed. Like all of like the sustenance and nutrients of this vine just begin to kind of spill over. And then this is what the vine dresser says they do. He says, we make a T-cut right in the middle. A T-cut. And I'm sitting here as a preacher listening to a vine dresser talk to me about grafting, and he's talking about a T-cut, which I see already as the cross. And he says, we just kind of wait a few days, 3 days, and then we take the seeds of the kind of the grape that we want to graft in, and what we do is we take the seeds and we put them right into the center of the T-cut, and then we bandage it up. We bandage it up. And then a few weeks later, we take the bandages off, we start caring for it, and within a few years, we have a new kind of grape. And he looks at me and he goes, what do you think? And I said, that's the gospel. He goes, what do you mean? I said, do you understand? This is like what has happened. Like I have taken all of my brokenness, all of the choices and words and decisions and fears and the ways that I have lived less than what God had created and intended me for, and I placed them onto the cross. And Jesus took all of that. And then by following in him and by his Spirit, new life, new creation, this whole new sense of meaning and purpose. And I began a cultivation of the fruit of the Spirit. And I began to bear new kinds of fruit. Friends, I'm here to tell you, it doesn't matter what you've done. I'm here to tell you that there is one that says, I can still graft you in and we can still bear some profoundly good fruit. and we can make a good bottle of wine. You just got to keep the main thing. You just got to trust the pruning. You just got to trust the process. And you've just got to trust his promise that apart from him, you can do nothing. But when you remain, abide, and abode in him, you will do things that you never believed were possible. Ocean Reef Chapel, I love you. I believe in you. And I'm praying that every one of you, even in the face of these circumstances of our day that honestly we never foresaw coming 6 months ago, I'm praying that you would be the kind of church, the kind of model for so many that can keep the main thing. And that when we fast forward some seasons down the road, you will bear such incredible fruit. And with your lives, you will make such beautiful new wine. Thanks so much for having me. I hope this message blessed you. Pastor Bob's going to come up and give you a benediction. But until next time, grace and peace, and keep the main thing the main thing.